Tell my boyfriend I'm single this weekend, Vegas edition.
My girlfriend whispered these words, her voice dripping with alcohol and arrogance, while live streaming herself, locked in a passionate embrace with a stranger.
You.
I stood there in my hotel room in Denver, the silence deafening. I didn't scream. I didn't blow up her phone. I didn't lose my mind. I simply opened my laptop, accessed the airline portal, and canceled her flight home. Then,
Fusat. I watched the fallout begin.
by Monday, the private group chat she shared with her friends Grace, Aurora, and Baka would be leaked to me, revealing a betrayal far deeper than a drunken night. Hey Reddit!
Get into the details.
My name is Cole, and for 30 years I've been an aviation safety inspector. My life is built on discipline and staying calm when the engine fails or the wings start to wobble. When a crisis hits,
Panic. You follow the protocol.
I've been with Cecilia for 4 years, living in a quiet, organized apartment. I thought we were a team, building a life toward a future we both wanted.
Failed to see the cracks forming underneath the surface.
I didn't notice that Cecilia needed social media validation, like a starving person needs food. Her friends were no better. Grace was the orchestrator,
Thing.
a woman who hid her cruelty behind empowerment buzzwords. Aurora was the curator, filming her life as if it were a movie, and she was the main character. And Becca, well,
Iggy.
she was just the shadow that followed, wherever the wind blew. 6 weeks before the disaster, they planned a getaway to the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas. Cecilia asked if I was okay with it, and I said yes. Why wouldn't I be?
Thing. I trusted her.
I was scheduled to be in Denver for a 3-day inspection during that same time frame. Then the red flags started appearing, one after another. She kept asking if I would be weird about her going,
Fectin.
insisting that I just needed to trust her. It was her way of preemptively silencing any objections. Then came the crash diet and the obsession with expensive outfits we couldn't afford. She wanted to be the most aesthetic one in the group photos. Then, the phone, tilting, the leaving the room every time she got a text, the flinching whenever I walked past her. Not a paranoid man,
Fumo.
but even a blind person could have seen the shift in her energy.
But on that Wednesday
Before the trip, I used 300,000 of my own hard-earned airline points to book her flight. I kissed her goodbye at the airport on Thursday,
thanked.
truly believing she deserved a break. I even fantasized about picking her up on Spunsy with flowers, but Friday night changed everything. Around 11 p.m. Mountain Time, my phone started buzzing relentlessly. At first,
Few tanks.
I thought it was an emergency at work. Instead, I found links sent by 5 different people, all pointing to Aurora's Instagram live. I clicked the link. There they were. The music was deafening, the lights were strobing,
In the alcohol.
was flowing like water. Aurora was narrating the entire scene as if it were a high-end show. And here we have Cecilia, absolutely living her best life. Aurora shouted, pivoting the camera.
Fuse depth.
The lens zoomed in on Cecilia, who was dancing with a man I had never seen in my life. He had his hands all over her, and she looked completely intoxicated. He was wearing a dress I had never seen before, something expensive and revealing. Cecilia looked straight into the camera lens and laughed. "I'm off the clock and off the leash," she declared, her eyes glassy and wild.
They don't care. Who's watching?
The camera panned over to Grace, who cheered in the background. "What happens in Vegas, right?" Grace added, followed by the sound of glass clinking. Then,
Feel.
Cecilia turned back to the stranger and began making out with him, her body pressed firmly against his. I watched for 2 minutes before I closed the app. I didn't feel anger. I felt a cold, mechanical sense of clarity.
Reddit.
I logged into the airline system and canceled her return ticket. Then, I turned off my phone and slept for 8 hours. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of missed calls from Cecilia and her friends.
Answer any of them.
I finished my inspection in Denver, filed my reports, and grabbed a flight to a different city, my hometown. It wasn't until Sunday night that I finally looked at my messages.
Cecilia.
Was in a total panic. She was stranded in Vegas, and the group chat messages, which had been forwarded to me by a concerned friend who was also in Vegas, told the full story. The girls were arguing.
Fusing.
Aurora was complaining about the drama, and Grace was trying to blame me for being controlling by canceling the ticket. But the real twist came in a text from Becca to the group. He canceled the card too.
You,
The one, linked to the hotel room deposit, were getting kicked out. Cecilia's response was chilling. I don't care about the money. I just need to get back, so I can lie about what happened before he sees the footage.
Fenu, screenshotted everything.
I didn't just cancel her flight. I had frozen the joint account she was using for their Vegas spending spree. When I returned to our apartment on Monday, he was waiting outside with a suitcase and tears in her eyes. She looked small, exhausted, and desperate. Cole, please, she started, grabbing my arm. It was just a joke, a stupid game for social media. It didn't mean anything.
Thinkst.
I looked at her, and for the first time in 4 years, I felt absolutely nothing. The video is already downloaded, Cecilia, I said, my voice steady. And the screenshots of the group chat where you plan to gaslight me?
Megan.
Those are already on their way to your parents and your job. Her face went pale. You wouldn't, she whispered. You're not a victim, Cecilia, I replied, stepping back. You're just an employee who forgot their shift is over.
Vexed.
I dropped her key on the porch. The locks are changed. Your things are in the garage. Don't call me again. She started to scream, but I had already turned my back. I walked inside and locked the door behind me.
Justice isn't always loud.
Sometimes it's just the sound of a deadbolt clicking into place. I sat on the couch, opened a book, and for the first time in a long time, I finally felt at peace. This is a dramatic,
High stakes.
storytelling script designed for a YouTube narration. It follows your structure, constraints, and emotional beats. My hands were trembling, but not because of rage. It was a hollow,
Freezing sensation.
the kind you feel when your entire reality shifts on its axis. I stared at my phone screen, the blue light reflecting in my pupils, as the Instagram Live played out in real time. There she was. Cecilia.
You.
The woman who kissed me goodbye at the airport just 2 days ago, promising she'd be back by Sunday. She was in a club in Las Vegas, laughing, her hair messy, her skin flushed.
He was pressed against some random guy.
I had never seen in my life. It wasn't just a quick peck, it was an act performed for the camera. And there in the background I heard them, Aurora and Grace, her best friends,
Hicks.
giggling and narrating the spectacle like they were watching a movie. Look at her go! Aurora shouted into the microphone of her phone. The comment section was a waterfall of fire emojis and cruel jokes. Wait,
Isn't she dating someone? Someone typed.
who cares? Grace replied in the chat, her username popping up immediately. He's too obsessed with discipline anyway. Tonight, she's off the clock. My heart hammered against my ribs.
347 people were watching.
My coworkers, our shared friends, people who had sat at our dinner table just weeks prior. They weren't just watching her cheat, they were laughing at me.
Fission.
They wanted me to lose it. They wanted me to flood the chat with rage so Cecilia could play the victim, painting me as the controlling, toxic boyfriend who couldn't handle a girl's night out. I didn't send a single text.
You.
I didn't leave a single comment. I didn't scream, even though every muscle in my body was begging for release. I sat in that hotel room in Denver, the silence of the night pressing against my ears.
You know my airline account.
I looked at the flight reservation for her return trip. Off the clock, she said. Fine. I clicked cancel. The screen refreshed instantly. Booking canceled. Points refunded.
You.
She wasn't coming home on my dime. I spent the next hour working through a systematic destruction of our digital life. Shared Netflix account? Gone. Spotify family plan removed. Her name on my car, insurance?
Things.
Scheduled a call for Monday morning to scrub it off. I was cutting the cords, one by one, with the clinical precision of a surgeon. By Saturday morning, I was already back home.
You.
I had lied to my supervisor about a family emergency which, considering the betrayal, felt like the truth. I landed, walked into my apartment, and immediately set up the Ring camera I'd ordered.
You.
I needed to see what happened when she finally crawled back. My phone had been on airplane mode for hours. The moment I turned it back on, the notifications crashed in like a wave. 47 missed calls.
62 texts. Cole, my card is declined. Why are you doing this?
You can't leave me stranded here. Answer the phone. This isn't funny. Not a single "I'm sorry." Not a single shred of remorse. Just the panicked fuse entitled screeching of someone who had suddenly realized their safety net had been burned. Sunday night, I sat in the living room surrounded by 12 boxes, all labeled, all packed, every single piece of her life neatly contained.
Phone rang.
It wasn't Cecilia. It was Patricia, her mother. I hesitated, then answered. "Cole," she said, her voice heavy with fatigue. "Cecilia called me. She told me you left her in Vegas."
Phone tight.
"She told you why?" "She did," Patricia sighed. "And frankly, Cole, I'm disappointed in her. Not you." The room felt colder. "What do you mean? This isn't the first time, Cole. She's done this before."
Time and time again.
"She burns people who actually care about her." I was hoping she'd grown up, but I suppose she never will. The revelation hit me harder than the video. I wasn't the first, and I wouldn't be the last.
Bing.
I was just the latest victim of a cycle I hadn't been warned about. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for explanations. I simply thanked her and hung up. On Monday,
Beam.
when Cecilia finally managed to scrape together enough money to fly home and showed up at my door, she looked disheveled and desperate. She had her key in her hand, ready to barge in and start her usual drama.
He stopped.
The front door was locked tight, and there, sitting right outside in the hallway, were 12 boxes. I opened the door just a crack not enough to let her in, just enough to be heard. "The locks are changed,"
Thea said.
my voice steady, devoid of the hurt it felt days before. "Everything you own is in those boxes. Don't call me. Don't contact me." "Cole, wait," she started, her voice cracking. I didn't wait. I didn't yell.
Phew.
I just closed the door and heard the lock click. For the first time in years, the house was mine again. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was peace. And for the first time,
Finally felt like I was back on the clock. The clock of my own life.
I stood there in the lobby of my office building, watching the woman who had shared my life for 4 years crumble into a heap of desperate, mascara-streaked sobs.
Fusion.
4 years of building a home, planning a future, and trusting her with my absolute silence, all reduced to a public spectacle. She thought her tears would be the key to opening the door I had already bolted shut,
He didn't know.
that I had already seen the truth behind the curtains. She didn't know that the drunk mistake she claimed was actually a carefully rehearsed production. My name is Cole,
Vint.
and this is how I learned that some people don't just break your heart, they write a script to destroy your reputation while they're at it.
Dot.
The security guard buzzed me, his voice sounding apologetic through the intercom. "Cole,
Fubzub.
there's a woman in the lobby. She's making quite a scene." I didn't need to ask who it was. When I stepped off the elevator, the sight of Cecilia's suitcase in hand, looking like a tragic actress in a low-budget drama, hit me like a physical blow. She spotted me immediately, her face contorting into that familiar look of performative agony.
Cole. Oh, thank God. Fig, I've been trying to reach you everywhere.
She lunged forward. But I took a sharp step back, my expression as cold as the glass walls surrounding us. "We shouldn't be doing this here." Cecilia. The office staff were watching,
Eve.
whispering behind their monitors, their eyes glued to the scene. She grabbed my sleeve, her fingers trembling with a practiced fragility. "Please, just 5 minutes. I'm lost. I have nowhere to go. And I'm so sorry about Vegas."
Just a stupid, drunken mistake.
I felt a ghost of a memory. The 4 years we spent flicker in my chest, but then I remembered the video. I remembered the way she had looked at that camera,
Fiancée.
the way she had announced to the world that she was off the clock. "You keep using the word mistake, Cecilia, but that implies an accident," I said, my voice cutting through the lobby's chatter. "An accident is a stumble. What you did was a series of conscious, calculated choices." Her face flushed, the fake tears momentarily stalling. "I was drunk. I wasn't in my right mind." "You were coherent enough to film it," I countered.
Club.
"You chose to dance. You chose to make a mockery of us for your followers." She pulled back, her eyes narrowing as the mask began to slip. "You're being cruel, Cole. You left me there with no money, no way home."
Support. I could have been hurt.
You had 3 friends with you, I reminded her. Where were they when you needed help? She scoffed, a bitter, sharp sound. Grace disappeared the second the bill hit.
Thing.
Aurora was too busy capturing the perfect angle for her story. Becca was useless. I was completely alone. Sounds like you chose your company poorly, I said, and you made your choices. Now you have to live with the consequences. You tried one last time, her voice dropping to a seductive, soft whisper. I love you, Cole. Can't. We just go home and forget this happened. The apartment isn't your home anymore, I said, turning toward the elevator.
Packed your belongings.
You can retrieve them on Friday through the building manager. Don't call me again. I didn't wait for her to scream. I didn't wait for her to apologize again. I walked away, feeling a strange,
Follow sense of clarity.
That night, I sat in living room surrounded by cardboard box the graveyard of a 4-year relationship. My phone buzzed. It was Becca. The text was short, vibrating with a nervous energy.
Can we talk?
There is something you need to know about Vegas. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her the following day. The coffee shop was quiet.
Fiancée.
The smell of roasted beans doing nothing to settle the knot in my stomach. Becca sat across from me, looking like a woman who had been carrying a lead weight in her chest.
He didn't speak.
She just slid her phone across the table. The screen displayed a group chat titled Vegas Escape. I scrolled through the messages, and with every swipe, the ground beneath me felt less stable. Weeks before the trip, Grace had been the architect of the chaos. Cecilia, you need to stop letting Cole control your fun. You're allowed to be free. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, Cecilia had replied. Then,
The night of the club.
Aurora had typed. Going live in 5. Cecilia, you ready? Cecilia's reply sent a chill down my spine. Yeah, let's do it. Content is content. I pushed the phone back, my hands shaking. They scripted it.
Thing.
I whispered, the realization tasting like ash. It wasn't a mistake. It was a production. Becca looked down at her coffee, her voice barely a murmur. It gets worse, Cole. They are framing you.
There. Telling everyone.
You're an abusive, controlling psycho who trapped her and abandoned her in Vegas. My work in aviation safety requires a spotless reputation.
This narrative's
Gained traction if they painted me as unstable. It wouldn't just cost me my relationship. It could cost me my career. I pulled up Instagram on my own phone. Aurora's latest post was already up.
Think.
A picture of a sad-looking Cecilia with a caption about escaping toxic chains and men who fear powerful women.
Dot.
The comments section was a swarm of righteous anger, with people tagging my accounts, calling me names. I couldn't even repeat. But they had made one massive, fatal error. They assumed I was just a victim. They didn't realize that in my line of work, I live and die by documentation. Reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop. You think they can ruin me? I asked, looking at Becca. They forgot one thing. I don't just feel things, Becca. I keep records. I opened a file containing every email, every location ping from that night, and the transcript of the video where they bragged about the content. They wanted a story? I said, my voice cold and focused. Then I'm going to give the world the full unedited version.
Friday morning.
The building manager called to say Cecilia was at the lobby, ready to collect her things. I didn't go down. Instead, I sent an email to the entire group, including Grace, Aurora, and Cecilia.
Thing.
I attached the full video of their planning session, the chat logs, and a letter from my legal counsel regarding the defamation campaign they were launching.
Dot. I hit send.
10 minutes later, the lobby was silent. Cecilia left the boxes behind. She didn't try to knock on my door. She knew that if she took another step, the truth would be on every newsfeed she cared about. I sat in my apartment, the silence no longer hollow.
Emailed.
It was the quiet of a storm that had passed, leaving the ground clean. I poured a cup of coffee, watched the sun rise over the city, and finally, for the first time in 4 years, I felt entirely, perfectly free.
Frap was set.
And I could see the strings pulling from every direction. I stared at my phone, the screen glowing with a notification. That Cecilia was playing the victim once again. I opened Instagram, and there it was, a long,
Performative post.
from Aurora, rambling about toxic relationships and men who were too fragile to handle strong, independent women. She hadn't mentioned my name, but the subtext was loud enough to wake the neighbors.
Think.
The comments section was a battlefield. Some people were eating it up like gospel, while others were actually calling her out for enabling a serial cheater. They aren't finished. Yet, Becca whispered through the phone,
That.
her voice shaking slightly. They're planning an ambush at your place this Friday. The moment Cecilia comes to grab the rest of her things, I felt my jaw tighten. Grace convinced them that if they all show up together, they can corner you, pressure you, and force a reconciliation that you can't say no to. That's not going to happen, I said, my voice cold. I know, Becca replied, a moment of hesitation hanging in the air.
Egan.
I had to tell you.
What are you going to do, Cole?
They're actively destroying your reputation. Everyone is starting to believe their version of the truth. I took a deep breath, looking out the window at the city lights.
You.
Part of me wanted to unleash everything to post the screenshots, thus timestamps, and the group chat logs that proved exactly how calculating, cold and staged, this entire betrayal had been. But then I realized, stooping to their level would only validate their chaotic reality. Nothing, I finally said. The truth doesn't need a PR campaign. The people who truly know me already know the reality. As for the rest,
Opinions have no value.
Becca let out a long, shaky breath. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have spoken up in Vegas. I should have told Cecilia how insane this was. I was just terrified of them. Yeah.
I replied softly.
Before we hung up, she sent me every single screenshot from their group chat. I saved them into a folder simply labeled Vegas, tucked away for a rainy day. We talked for another 10 minutes.
Egan.
And she confirmed that the internal collapse had already begun. Grace was already throwing Cecilia under the bus, calling her weak and disowning her as a friend. Aurora had pivoted to a healing era persona,
Thing.
posting content about growth while conveniently ignoring the fact that she had literally filmed and narrated the entire affair. Cecilia was crashing at Grace's place, which sounded like a recipe for a disaster I was no longer part of. Thursday morning, I loaded 12 boxes into my car and drove to Cecilia's parents' home. Patricia, her mother, had texted me the day before, asking me to drop everything there so they could ensure Cecilia got her things without any more confrontation. I arrived around 10 a.m. Patricia was waiting on the porch, face lined with an exhaustion that went deeper than just this week. Cole, she said, her voice heavy. I'm so sorry. I nodded, not needing the apology. I spent the next hour hauling boxes into their garage, while her father, Robert, silently helped me with the heavy ones. Neither of them said much. There wasn't really anything left to say. When we finished, Patricia invited me inside for coffee. Cecilia called last night, Patricia said, her hands trembling slightly as she poured the coffee. She told us you refused to talk to her. That's the version she's selling herself, I replied, neutrally. Patricia sat down heavily, but before she could respond, Mia, Cecilia's younger sister, walked into the room. I had only met Mia a few times, but she always felt like the one who saw everything the rest of the family chose to ignore. She sat down, took a sip of her coffee, friendly at me. Cecilia did this exact same thing during her sophomore year, Mia said, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. A girl's trip to Cancun. She posted videos with some guy she met at the resort. Her boyfriend at the time was devastated. Mom and dad paid for couples therapy, paid for her flight home, and basically smoothed over every consequence until he took her back. Patricia looked down at her mug. Her silence, a quiet admission of guilt. We enabled it, Patricia whispered. We thought we were helping. Then she did it again with the next guy, Mia continued, turning to her parents. The Miami trip. Same pattern.
That guy was smarter, though. He didn't fall for it.
But again, you two covered her rent for months, while she played the victim of a broken heart. Robert looked up, his eyes weary. We raised a daughter who learned that consequences are just suggestions, he admitted. The weight of their confession hit me harder than any of the insults Cecilia had thrown my way. Patricia looked at me.
tears welling in her eyes.
She called us, begging us to convince you to give her one more chance, she said. We told her no, if this is going to be fixed, it has to come from her, not through us.
It can't be fixed,
I said.
voice steady.
This wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated series of choices. We know, Robert said, standing up, and for what it's worth, you deserve better than what our daughter gave you. That was the end of it.
Viewed that.
I left their home with a strange, hollow sense of peace, knowing exactly who she was and exactly where she had learned it. That night, the smear campaign reached a fever pitch.
You.
Grace was posting about supporting friends through trauma, implying that I was the source of that trauma. Aurora began a series of stories about identifying red flags in abusive partners.
Carefully painting me as the villain of her twisted story.
Cecilia finally posted a quote about narcissists making you question your reality. My phone was flooded with messages from mutual friends, some worried, some curious.
I'm just looking for the latest gossip.
I ignored them all, except for a few select people who genuinely mattered to them. I sent one simple message. If you need to ask if I'm abusive,
You don't know me well enough for me to explain.
Friday arrived. The plan was simple. The building superintendent would let Cecilia in to grab her remaining things while I stayed safely at work.
Thing about these people was ever simple.
Around 2 p.m., my phone rang. Mr. Cole, the super asked, his voice stressed. We have a situation. Cecilia isn't alone. Who is with her? I asked, already knowing the answer.
Grace.
Aurora and another woman. They're demanding entry. They're making a scene in the lobby. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. They weren't here for belongings, were they? The super asked. No, I said.
Fear. To put on a show.
They're threatening to call the police if I don't let them up. I thought about it for a second. They had scripted this drama, planned the performance, and were waiting for me to panic.
Tell them it'll be there in
30 minutes, I said. A dangerous calm washing over me. And tell them we'll talk in the lobby. I'm inviting witnesses. I left work early and called Becca on the way.
Still want to do the right thing?
I asked. What do you mean? She stammered. I mean, are you ready to show them that the story is changing? I walked into the lobby, phone recording.
Thing. Ready to end this charade once and for all.
Hey, Reddit, you won't believe the drama I had to deal with today. Finally sitting down to type this out because my hands are still shaking from the confrontation. Some of you might remember the story I shared about my ex, Cecilia, and how she completely blew up our 4-year relationship for the sake of her content creator friends. Well, it didn't end there. Today, they decided to show up at my building, demanding access to my apartment to collect her things. I knew exactly what this was. A trap. I told the concierge to let them into the lobby, but I made it clear.
One is coming up to my floor.
I headed home early, my pulse racing, and made one final call to Becca, who had been the quietest one in their little inner circle. Are you still going to do the right thing? I asked her.
Feed.
My voice low and steady. What do you mean? She whispered, sounding terrified. Bring the group chat screenshots, I replied. Every single one of them. Not playing their social media games.
Them. And definitely not letting them run a circus in my lobby.
There was a long silence, then a heavy sigh. Grace is going to completely lose her mind. Good, I said, and hung up. 20 minutes later,
Feed.
I walked into the lobby. It was a scene straight out of a trashy reality show. Cecilia looked pale and anxious, probably wondering if I'd actually press charges. Aurora was already holding her phone up,
Streaming live on Instagram.
her eyes darting around for the best angle. Grace stood in the center, arms crossed, looking like she was ready to tear the building down just to win an argument. Becca stood apart from them.
Fuse clutching her purse like a lifeline.
I gestured toward the seating area, keeping my tone cold. We can talk here. Grace immediately stepped forward, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. We aren't doing this in public.
Speak.
Cole, this is a private matter between you and Cecilia. I let out a dry laugh. Nothing about this has been private since you decided to broadcast our breakup to thousands of strangers. You chose an audience, Grace.
E1.
Now you have one. Aurora clicked her tongue, her camera never wavering, recording this for my own protection. Record everything, I replied, stepping into the frame. Make sure you don't miss a second of this.
Asia.
The doorman kept his head down, desperately trying to look busy, though I knew he was hanging on every word. I looked straight at Cecilia. So, what exactly did you forget?
Cooper, you had essential items to collect. Name them.
Cecilia blinked, caught off guard. She looked at Grace for a cue, but Grace was busy trying to salvage her own reputation. That's not the point, Cole.
To get us here. You're acting like a villain, and Cecilia just wants closure.
I turned to the doorman. Oh. For the record, I said, my voice echoing in the marble lobby. Cecilia started to cry. Those practiced.
Perfect tears.
Cole, please. I messed up. I know I hurt you, but 4 years. 4 years has to mean something. I love you. You don't love me, Cecilia, I said, feeling a strange sense of clarity.
The comfort I gave you.
You love the stability you threw away for a few likes. Grace tried to cut in again, but I wasn't having it. You abandoned her in Vegas. Grace, you know how dangerous that was.
Freedom.
Aurora chirped from behind the camera. Dangerous is going live with strangers and calling it find yourself. I shot back. Grace's face turned a deep, ugly shade of red.
Thanks, Shin.
I looked directly at the lens. Keep recording, Aurora. This is the part where the truth comes out. I nodded to Becca. She took a shaky breath and pulled out her phone. Becca, what are you doing? Grace hissed.
Her composure finally cracking.
Showing him the truth, Becca said, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. She walked over and handed me her phone. I didn't even look at the screen.
Handed it straight to Cecilia.
Read it out loud, I commanded. I can't, Cecilia stammered. Read the group chat. The one from before Vegas. Read exactly what Grace and Aurora told you to do.
Thing.
The room went deathly silent. Grace lunged forward, her mask finally slipping. Becca, don't you dare. After everything we've done for you, we included you when no one else wanted you. You didn't include me, Becca shouted.
Pulling off the walls.
You used me as a camera operator while you destroyed a man's life just for content.
That's not friendship.
That's exploitation. Aurora's hand was shaking now, the phone wobbling.
This is being taken out of context,
she yelled. Then let's add the context, I said. I pulled out my own phone and began reading from the screenshots. Becca had sent me the night before.
Thing.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Don't tell him everything. Own your freedom. If he can't handle it, that's his problem. I looked up, meeting Grace's panicked eyes. This was planned. Every single move. The live.
Frail. The performance.
You weren't helping her. Find herself, you were helping her burn her life down for views. Grace was spiraling, her manager persona completely shattered. You're twisting this!
Supporting our friend.
Dot. You were encouraging her to cheat and blaming me for the fallout, I said. Grace turned on Becca, her voice venomous. Becca, you need to stick to the story.
Speak on.
The words hung in the air, damning and clear. Stick to the story. A literal admission of a manufactured narrative. I smiled, a cold, empty feeling in my chest. Did you hear that, Aurora? Is the camera still running?
Feel.
Aurora lowered her phone, realizing she had just recorded the downfall of her own group. Cecilia was sitting on the lobby bench,
Fezzy.
staring at the phone in her hands as if she were seeing the reality of her life for the first time. Maybe she finally realized she was never the main character in their world. She was just the props department.
Keeping the recording.
Aurora muttered, trying to regain some shred of power. Good, I said. Post it, all of it. It doesn't change the fact that you're all frauds. I stood up and faced Cecilia.
Is at your parents' house.
I've documented everything, and if I see any of you near this building again, I'm filing a restraining order for harassment. Cecilia tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. We're done.
Cecilia. Accept it. Move on.
I walked to the elevator, my back straight. Behind me, I could hear them fighting Grace, screaming at Becca, Aurora crying about the algorithm, and Cecilia just sobbing.
Fagnun.
The elevator doors closed, cutting off the noise, and for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I got back to my apartment and just stood in the silence. It was finally over, or so I thought. Around 11 p.m.,
Figs.
My doorbell ring camera chimed. I checked the app, and there they were, Cecilia, Grace, and Aurora, all of them, stumbling drunk, staring up at my door,
Feet.
wondering why the real world doesn't work like their curated Instagram feed. I didn't answer. I just hit block on all of them, sat down, and finally truly slept.
Fact.
The notification on my ring camera didn't take long to arrive. It was 11 p.m. when the alert pinged, pulling me away from a quiet evening. I opened the app, and there they were, standing in the dim hallway light. Cecilia.
Grace and Aurora.
They were clearly intoxicated, swaying unsteadily as they crowded the frame. Grace began pounding her fists against my door with frantic energy. Cole, open up this door right now.
You.
We aren't going anywhere until you come out and give us an explanation. The thudding continued, relentless and aggressive. Cecilia leaned her forehead against the doorframe, sobbing loudly for effect. Aurora was right there.
Thanks it.
Phone raised, capturing every frame of the spectacle. Even in this moment of total humiliation, she was still trying to turn my life into viral content. I sat on my sofa in the shadows, watching them through the screen.
Refusing to give them the reaction they craved.
This is absolutely ridiculous, Grace shouted, her voice rising in pitch as the alcohol fueled her ego. You can't just hide in there like a coward. Bang! Bang! Bang!
You.
Suddenly, a neighbor's door creaked open down the hall. An older man, looking exhausted in his bathrobe, stepped out. Hey, keep it down out there. Some of us are trying to sleep. Grace spun around,
Fingzhou.
her eyes sharp with defensive venom. Doc, mind your own business, old man. I'm calling the building manager immediately. The supervisor arrived 10 minutes later, his face tight with clear annoyance.
Yushin.
I had already messaged him earlier that day, requesting that these specific people be barred from entering the building. Grace immediately shifted into her manager voice, trying to manipulate the situation.
Vent.
Aurora waved her phone in the air, loudly claiming they were merely documenting harassment. The supervisor stood his ground, unfazed by their theatrics. Ladies, you need to leave the premises right now.
Fact, or I am calling the police.
Grace tried to argue, but the supervisor pulled out his phone, ready to make the call. This is your last chance. They finally turned to leave, but Grace couldn't resist one last parting shot. She spun back toward my door, screaming,
You are going to regret this, Cole.
I watched them stumble toward the elevator, Aurora still filming, still searching for a narrative that fit their twisted view of reality.
15.
The neighbor who had complained earlier had also filmed the entire pathetic display on his own phone. The next morning, it was all over the building's group chat. 15 messages,
Views.
all mocking the drunk women who had caused a scene at midnight. No one mentioned me by name, but the message was loud and clear. Their chaos had created its own evidence. I sent a quick text to the supervisor.
Anyone from that group shows up again.
Call security immediately.
Don't call me.
Then, I sent a single final message to Cecilia's number. Do not come here again. I blocked her before the message even finished sending.
It was done.
2 months slipped by in a blur of productivity. I refocused on my career and threw myself back into my fitness routine.
Isn't.
I began reconnecting with friends I had drifted away from during the toxicity of that relationship. I even started seeing a woman named River, whom I met at the gym. It wasn't anything serious yet, but it was honest, easy.
Refreshing.
Life was finally moving forward. The fallout for them, however, was swift. In a small city, that lobby clip traveled like wildfire. It flooded group chats, professional networks, and local circles.
If you do that.
Aurora's attempt to paint herself as a victim backfired when people saw how Grace had forced the narrative. Grace started losing her event clients, one cancellation spiraling into another.
You that.
Aurora's healing content was ruthlessly roasted in the comments. Becca sought out therapy. Cecilia went dark for 3 weeks, then resurfaced, posting single girl content. Her captions were full of buzzwords about narcissists. She never mentioned Vegas. She never once took accountability for the wreckage she left behind, and then everything came back around on a quiet Thursday night. It was 9 p.m. when my Ring camera sent an alert.
The app.
expecting a Latin night delivery. Instead, I saw Cecilia. She was alone, this time, no entourage, no cameras. She was dressed up, hair and makeup perfect,
Things.
holding a box of the expensive boutique chocolates I used to love. She knocked softly, a gentle rhythmic sound that lacked the desperation of the previous visit. She waited. She knocked again.
Faked.
I watched her through the lens for a long time. She looked nervous, constantly checking her reflection in her phone screen to ensure her hair was just right. Finally, she looked directly into the camera. Cole,
You're in there.
please, I'm begging you. Just 5 minutes. I walked to the door, but I didn't unlock it. There is nothing left to talk about, I said, my voice steady through the wood. Please, she whispered,
Her voice cracking.
I brought your favorites. I just want to show you I'm serious. About us. About trying again. There is no us, Cecilia. There could be, she insisted, tears streaming down her face now.
Thinking about what we had.
About our future. I talked to my parents and they think if we did couples therapy, we could fix this. She took a shaky breath and maybe we should just get married.
The engagement. Just do it and start fresh.
I almost laughed out loud. Marriage doesn't cure a broken character, Cecilia.
What?
You think a wedding just magically fixes what you did. That's not how the world works.
Made one mistake. One mistake in 4 years.
Doesn't that count for something? It wasn't a mistake, I countered, my voice hardening. You planned it. You chose it. You celebrated it.
Fix.
And then you had the nerve to blame me for having boundaries. Through the camera, I saw her face crumble. She set the chocolates down in front of the door. So, that's it. You won't even try. There is nothing left to try for.
Thing to regret this, Cole. When you realize what you gave up.
Not giving anything up. Choosing myself. There was a heavy, suffocating silence. Can you at least open the door?
Me in the eye. When you say that. No.
I watched her stand there for another minute, hoping for a flicker of change, a sign that she finally understood. But when the door remained locked, she picked up the chocolates,
Fiancée.
hesitated, set them back down, and then picked them up again. Finally, she just left them on the floor and walked away. I watched until her silhouette disappeared down the hallway.
You.
The box of chocolates sat there for an hour before I opened the door, picked them up, and dropped them directly into the trash chute. It wasn't out of spite. I just didn't want them in my home. Friday morning, Patricia called me. Cecilia tried to see you last night, she said quietly. Yeah, she did. She wanted to reconcile. Even brought up marriage. Patricia sighed, a sound of profound relief mixed with exhaustion. She called me afterward.
He said.
You wouldn't even open the door.
I didn't.
Good, Patricia replied firmly. Robert and I wanted you to know we're done enabling her. We paid for her therapy, but we aren't paying her rent or bailing her out anymore.
She needs to face the reality of what she did.
I appreciate you saying that, Patricia. You were good to her, Cole. Better than she ever deserved. We said our goodbyes, and I sat there for a while,
You.
reflecting on how an entire life can collapse into something as small as a closed door and a box of chocolates in the trash. Saturday afternoon, I was at River's place when my phone buzzed with a message from Aurora,
Screenshot of a
where Grace was talking about fixing things once I got lonely enough. I deleted the message without responding. Their drama was no longer my problem. Sunday, River came over to my apartment.
food. Settled in for a movie. And eventually fell asleep on the couch.
When I woke up a while later, she was in the kitchen making coffee. She turned around, saw me, and flashed a genuine, soft smile.
Chaos of the past was gone.
And for the first time in a long time, the future felt completely, perfectly mine. The drama was no longer my cross to bear. Sunday, River walked through my front door.
Bringing a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months.
We ordered Italian food, found a movie that felt like home, and eventually drifted off to sleep on the sofa. When I woke up in the quiet glow of the morning, she was already in the kitchen brewing coffee, offering me a soft smile that made the world feel right again. In that silence, my mind drifted to Cecilia one final time. I thought about the chaos in Vegas,
Toxic Instagram live.
and every calculated move that followed. I pictured the doorstep, the cold barrier of that closed door, and the weight of the lies they tried to build against me. But then, I simply let it go.
Fusey.
It wasn't about anger or crafting a dramatic statement to prove a point. I just watched the memory drift away like smoke, clearing the headspace for something real to take root. Staying calm was my greatest defense. It was the invisible shield that stopped me from doing anything reckless. While Cecilia panicked, scrambling to patch up the holes in her stories, I held my ground. I remained disciplined
Firm lines in the sand.
and sat back to watch their house of cards inevitably fall apart. There is a profound lesson in this, one I hope you all take to heart. Sometimes,
Bean.
the most powerful move you can make is simply refusing to play the game at all. Guys, we are hovering right on the edge of hitting 100,000 subscribers on this channel
You have been watching.
and haven't hit that button yet.
Please consider subscribing today.
It genuinely helps us reach that milestone and keeps this community growing.
You know.
Thank you for being the reason this dream is becoming a reality.